FBI is now investigating whether those alleged Hunter Biden emails are actually connected to a larger foreign intelligence operation.
They may be related to a foreign intelligence operation.
Foreign intelligence operation.
Foreign intelligence.
Foreign intelligence.
Foreign intelligence operation.
For all we know, these emails are made up.
The information found on the laptop may be part of a Russian disinformation campaign.
Part of a Russian disinformation effort.
Described by many intelligence experts as having hallmarks.
All the hallmarks
of a Russian
disinformation.
Russian disinformation
campaign.
This is a classic example of the right-wing media machine.
Ah, yes, the memories. Joining me now, one of the great columnists in the country and author of a new book about the Bidens called The Big Guy, Miranda Devine, joins me. Miranda, you've been all over this Russian collusion hoax for quite some time. I bet that video montage brings back some memories for you.
It sure does, Jesse. Thanks for having me on. I mean, it's really quite surreal to look back at that period before the 2020 election and just how dishonest not just the media and not just social media that censored us and locked, Twitter locked our account at the New York Post after we published the first stories from Hunter Biden's abandoned laptop, which kind of looked bad for Joe Biden because it showed that he had lied when he said he knew nothing about Hunter's overseas business dealings, because we had emails showing that he'd met with Hunter's Ukrainian business partner in Washington. But really, the reason I wrote the book was the cover-up that came from a much more sinister place than just pure politics. And I think this is a bigger story than the corruption story that involves Joe Biden from his earliest days as a senator. I think the cover-up really reaches into the bowels of these august institutions, these national security institutions, the CIA, the FBI, the State Department, the FBI, the Department of Justice, the IRS, who conspired at various times to protect Joe Biden and ensure that the American people didn't know the truth about one of the candidates for president in 2020. And then we also know that when Hunter Biden was being investigated criminally in Delaware, the Department of Justice and the CIA stepped in to protect him, to make sure that none of the evidence trails would ever be followed that led to Joe Biden, to ensure that, for instance, a cottage on Joe Biden's Wilmington estate that Hunter was living on could never be searched. A search warrant was not allowed to be taken out that the investigators wanted. For instance, the CIA called in the prosecutors to Langley and said to them, you really can't interview Kevin Morris, who was Hunter Biden's sugar brother, as his business partners called him, the man who lent Hunter upwards of $6 million to pay off his overdue tax bill and to live in the lifestyle that all the Bidens like to live in, which is, a $30,000 rental in Malibu.
Miranda, can you speak about this Morris guy a little bit more? Why would the CIA protect this guy? What's he to them?
Well, Joe Biden has been a useful puppet since he arrived at the age of 30 in sort of the accidental senator from Delaware, having won just by a few votes. He was immediately mentored by some pretty powerful Democrats in the Senate and Republicans, actually. Many of their wives felt sorry for the young senator because he'd just lost his wife and baby daughter. He was seen, I think, by the intelligence community as an empty vessel who would really do anything to further his own ambition and say anything. And so with very few skills and very little to recommend him, not much knowledge of the world, he was elevated to, probably the most powerful or one of the most powerful roles in the Senate, and that was chairman or ranking member for a decade of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. And, there he was one of the first senators to travel to China and He was wined and dined by the top CCP officials on the equivalent of Martha's Vineyard, and came back and was waxing lyrical, much like Tim Walz, Kamala Harris's running mate, did when he went to China and visited 30 times mysteriously. In fact, Joe Biden was so embarrassing in his love of China and his praise of it that the Weekly Standard at the time, this was I think back in the 90s, just excoriated him and mocked him mercilessly, I think on the cover, as the sort of Manchurian candidate in waiting. So that was, and Joe Biden was belligerent. Whatever the sort of military, the most extreme hawks of the military industrial complex wanted, that was Joe Biden. He wanted to bomb Belgrade. He was all about expanding NATO and regime change in Russia. And so he's their guy. He's the blobs guy, as the Obama people described that triumvirate of the CIA, the State Department, and the Pentagon. And Donald Trump is an existential threat, not to democracy, not to America, but to them, to their agenda. And their agenda, which is not is opaque. The American people really don't know it and wouldn't sign off on it. And Donald Trump, as president, presided over remarkable peace around the world. And that was because he approached foreign policy like he did domestic policy, just from first principles, like a developer from Queens who just saw a problem and figured out the most efficient way to fix it, rather than following some obscure agenda handed down to him by his masters in the blob. That's why they hate him, and that's why they will do whatever it takes to ensure that he doesn't win this year.
It's interesting you bring that up, Miranda, because that's been a theory of mine. I've been trying to work out in my head for quite some time why the resistance to Trump is so severe. He's not a hard right Republican by any stretch of the imagination. He's a fairly moderate guy on many things, but they speak about him like he's the second coming of Francisco Franco. And I always suspected it was tied to his foreign policy. It's interesting hearing you describe it that way.
Yes, and look, it's interesting. You just see yesterday that Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, was flown into Pennsylvania on a US military aircraft, basically to campaign for Kamala Harris, to trash Donald Trump, to visit a factory that's making missiles or bombs or something, to stand alongside for a picture opportunity, to stand alongside Kamala Harris stooges signing bombs, like Josh Shapiro there. This was, foreign interference in our election. There is early voting going on in Pennsylvania right now. It's just extraordinary the lengths they will go to. And as we saw really from the minute that we found the laptop and were given the laptop by Rudy Giuliani, the hard drive, and started reporting from it, the way that these shadowy figures will come out of the shadows and show themselves, they're not worried about being exposed, because I guess they're desperate to, in that sense, shut up our stories, make sure that the laptop was just traduced and discredited as Russian disinformation, which it was not. I mean, it was, the FBI had it in their possession, and it was used in June. I was sitting in court in Delaware when Hunter Biden was having a trial for those gun felonies, and I saw that laptop, that MacBook Pro, being lifted up by the prosecutor, shown to the jury, walked across the court, shown to the FBI witness who said, yes, that's Hunter Biden's laptop. We verified that it was back in November of 2019. Yes, our forensic experts looked at it and it hasn't been tampered with. And yes, we deemed that it was suitable to be used as evidence in a court of law, which it was used as in Delaware. And again, it was used in the indictment for tax offences that Hunter Biden just pleaded guilty to in California.
Your book, it's The Big Guy. If people want to know just how deep the corruption goes in this government, I would highly recommend you go pick up this wonderful book from Miranda Devine. Miranda, I cannot wait to dig into it myself. I appreciate you very much. As always, go pick up the book. I would thank you for coming to my YouTube channel, but I know how brilliant it is, and I know you love it here. So subscribe and watch. We're going to start really ramping things up and putting some funny stuff, some interesting stuff out there, some collaborations. Either way, my YouTube channel is officially the place to be. So stick around.